ancient Russian city of Nizhny Novgorod slept under a blanket of fresh, silent snow. Anatoly Moskvin sat alone in his cluttered study, surrounded by towering piles of dusty books. His life's work was studying the intricate burial rituals of the forgotten and the alone. But his academic fascination had long curdled into a dark, all-consuming obsession. One frigid night, he walked through the iron gates of the overgrown local cemetery, his shovel bit into the frozen earth with a quiet, rhythmic scraping sound. He was not there to desecrate, but to rescue what he saw as lonely souls. He carefully lifted a small, shrouded form from the cold ground. Back in his apartment, he began the meticulous process of preservation. He crafted a framework, a new body for his silent companion. With delicate stitches, he gave them new skin, new clothes, a new face. He gave them names and imagined their life stories from another time. One became his favorite, a little girl he called Masha. Years passed, and his macabre collection grew, filling every room of his home. He would host tea parties, setting a place for each of his 29 guests. The first anonymous tip came from a worried neighbor who heard strange noises at all hours. He talks to himself, but it sounds like many voices. She whispered to the police operator. Detective Irina Petrova dismissed the first call as mere urban paranoia, but the complaints persisted, always mentioning a strange smell of earth and chemicals. Finally, she and Officer Volkov decided to pay a routine visit to Mr. Moskvin. Anatoly answered the door, his eyes wide with sudden panic behind his spectacles. "We'd like to ask you a few questions about your activities," Petrova stated calmly. A foul, sweet odor of decay and formaldehyde wafted from the apartment. Officer Volkov pushed the door open further, revealing a shocking glimpse inside. The detectives stood frozen, their eyes adjusting to the dim light inside the cluttered home. Dozens of lifelike figures, dressed in fine clothing, stared back at them with silent, painted eyes. "They're my companions. I saved them from being forgotten," Anatoly murmured softly. Detective Petrova's blood ran cold as she realized these were not mannequins. She slowly reached out and touched the cheek of the nearest figure. It was cold and leathery. "My God, Volkov, these are human remains," she said, her voice a tense whisper. Anatoly simply stared, as if confused by their horror at his family. "Secure the suspect," Petrova ordered, her voice tight with controlled urgency. Officer Volkov carefully handcuffed the strangely compliant historian. Backup units arrived, their flashing blue lights painting the snowy street in pulses of eerie color. The small apartment was soon filled with forensics experts in white protective suits. They moved with hushed reverence, documenting the scene of unimaginable violation. One by one, they discovered the truth. 29 bodies, each meticulously transformed. There were girls in frilly dresses, boys in tiny suits, and elderly women in shawls. Petrova found a detailed journal, its pages filled with Anatoly's sprawling script and sketches. Each entry was a biography, a name, and a date he had brought them home. He wasn't hiding them, Petrova realized with dawning horror. He was curating a museum. The news broke, sending waves of shock and revulsion through the quiet city. Grieving families who had visited Anatoly's home now understood the terrible truth. He had often invited neighbors in, proudly showing off his unique doll collection. They had sipped tea, utterly unaware they were in a house of the dead. In the interrogation room, Anatoly was eerily calm under the bright, harsh lights. "I cannot bear their loneliness in the cold, forgotten ground," he explained softly. He spoke of hearing their voices, of a sacred duty to give them warmth and life again. Detective Petrova listened, her professional mask hiding a vortex of pity and disgust. "Where did you get the clothing, Anatoly? The materials?" she pressed, taking notes. "I made them," he said, a flicker of pride in his eyes. "I am a historian. I ensure the details are correct." Meanwhile, the heartbreaking process of identification began at the city morgue. Forensic anthropologists worked to match his journal entries with decades-old missing persons reports. One entry led them to Katia, a 3-year-old who had vanished from her grandmother's garden 20 years prior. Petrova had to deliver the news to a family that had long ago lost hope. The grandmother's anguished cry was not of relief, but of reawakened horror. "That kind man, he comforted me. At her graveside," she sobbed, her world shattered. The revelation painted a chilling picture of a predator hidden in plain sight by a veil of compassion. The court declared Anatoly Moskvin mentally unfit to stand trial, a verdict that left no one satisfied. He was sentenced to confinement in a secure psychiatric facility, forever lost in his own world. The empty apartment was sealed, a tomb for the story it once held. But for Detective Petrova, the case was a ghost that refused to leave her. She would wake in the night, seeing their silent, painted faces in the darkness. She visited the psychiatric facility once, needing to see him for herself. He sat perfectly still, facing the wall, lost in a conversation with someone only he could see. "Do they still get cold at night?" he asked the air, without turning to look at her. Petrova left without a word, the chill of his question following her out into the daylight. The victims were finally given a proper, collective burial in a memorial service. The city tried to heal, but the memory of the Dollmaker became a dark local legend. Years later, Petrova, now retired, still tends to the graves, ensuring they are never forgotten again. She understands his madness was born from a twisted form of love, not malice. But love, no matter its form, cannot justify the theft of eternal peace. The wind whispers through the trees, and for a moment, it almost sounds like children laughing. The story of Anatoly Moskvin serves as a haunting reminder of the fine line between devotion and delusion. And in the quiet of the night, the question remains, who was comforting whom? In his sterile room, Anatoly continued his work with scraps of paper and stolen crayons. He crafted a tiny paper bonnet, identical to the one he made for Masha years before. He placed it on the windowsill, a silent offering to the ghosts only he could see. One afternoon, he simply stopped moving, his final project lying unfinished in his lap. The orderlies found him, looking for all the world like he was finally at peace. The news of his death was a quiet footnote, bringing a complex closure to a dark chapter. Detective Petrova read the brief article, feeling a weight lift, yet a strange emptiness take its place. She drove to the memorial, the place that had become her own ritual of remembrance. Standing before the 29 names etched in stone, she finally understood his loneliness. He had stolen their peace to quiet the deafening silence within his own soul. She placed a single, small paper bonnet on the memorial, a final, fragile connection between the keeper and the kept. The wind picked it up and carried it away across the green fields of the resting dead. Petrova watched it go, a faint, sad smile finally gracing her lips. The story was over, the ghost could rest. And so, at last, could the living, for in the end, every soul, no matter how lost, is simply searching for a home. Years later, a young history student visited the archive. Pulling a box labeled Moskvin, she carefully turned the pages of his detailed, crumbling journals. She saw not a monster, but a tragic scholar, imprisoned by his own fractured mind. She closed the book, the silence of the archive holding the echo of his story forever. Some stories are not meant to be understood, only remembered, so they are never repeated. On a crisp autumn day, the wind whispers a familiar tune through the telephone wires. An elderly Irina Petrova walks through the city park, her steps slow but steady. She passes a bench where a young mother is adjusting her little girl's bonnet. The little girl laughs, a sound of pure, unburdened joy that echoes in the quiet air. Irina stops and watches, and for the first time, the memory brings a sense of peace, not pain. She understands now that the greatest memorial is a child's laughter, heard and cherished. The story ends not in a cemetery, but here, in the light, among the living. The first winter snow begins to fall, gently covering the city in a blanket of pure white. It settles on the memorial stone, obscuring the names, as if granting them anonymity once more.